I'm honored and humbled to once again be afforded the privilege to preside over this special session of Wake County Superior Court, which is convened for the purpose of remembering those members of the 10th Judicial District Bar whom we have lost in recent months. I recognize and thank all of the elected and public officials who are present, and I do see among us the elected clerk of Wake County Superior Court, Jennifer Knox, my learned judicial colleague on the Superior Court, Brian Collins. I also see former appellate judge of the Court of Appeals, Sid Eagles. I continue to scan the crowd to hopefully not be omitting anyone. We have Judge Robert Rader, the Chief District Court Judge of Wake County, who will be presenting later. And if there's anyone whom I've missed, please attribute it to my aging eyes and certainly not to my mind or my heart. I recognize and thank all of them and fellow members of the bar who are present for making a concerted effort to be here this afternoon. Recognition and thanks are in order as well for members of our wider legal community who have paused in their busy obligations to pay tribute to our fallen comrades in the law, who also are friends. Appreciation is likewise extended for the dedicated and detailed efforts of the 10th Judicial District Bar and the Bar's Memorials Committee for understanding the need for us who spend our lives in the legal arena to have a forum in which we can collectively remember, admire, and treasure those whom we miss. I'm personally grateful as well for the faith and confidence of Senior Resident Superior Court Judge Donald Stevens to entrust this important court session to my care, and thankful to the planners of this bar program for continuing to welcome my involvement. And certainly, the deepest and widest expressions of acknowledgement and gratitude are extended to you family members, loved ones, and friends of our departed colleagues in the legal profession, for it is enriching for us who had the pleasure to serve in the law with them to share our memories, observations, and emotions, not only about them with each other, but also with you. As I correct my omission to also recognize former District Court Judge Jane Gray, at this time I will call forward, as the court recognizes, the President of the 10th Judicial District Bar, Mark Finkelstein, in whose capable hands the facilitation of this memorial service are now placed.
Thank you, Rader. May it please the court. This memorial service and ceremonial session of Superior Court is one of the more meaningful moments in the life of this bar. We are fortunate to have these great examples in our lives as lawyers and in our communities. We owe these three individuals a real debt of gratitude because they've been real examples for the kinds of human beings and the kind of lawyers we wish to be. Thank you, Judge Morgan, for continuing to preside over these sessions, and thank you to the committee, the Memorials Committee of the 10th Judicial District Bar. And with the court's permission, I will turn this ceremonial session over to the chair of the Memorials Committee, Andrew Chaffee.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
I'm delighted to be here today, and thank you for joining us and for allowing us to honor your loved ones here today. Today is not a time for mourning, but a time to celebrate three individuals, three lawyers, three members of our bar. We're here because, as composer Irving Berlin put it, though the song is ended, the melody lingers on, and we are here to hear some of that. We're here to perhaps see a side of each person honored that we may not have known, and to fondly remember the things about each of them that we did know. Our first speaker here today is Tina Pace. She's a Duke undergrad and a Carolina Law grad. And she told me which one to emphasize, but I shan't get into that. And I'll let her honor Mr. Thomas Davis Buck Bunn.
My name is Tina Pace, and I'm a partner at Hatch Little & Bunn, and I have the privilege of knowing Thomas D. Buck Bunn for 30 years and for practicing law with him from 1994 until his retirement. I met Mr. Bunn when I was 16 years old, so to me he's Mr. Bunn. Doesn't mean anything about a lack of affection, it's just his name, Mr. Bunn. So that's what I'm going to call him. And I'm going to step out. I'm a little less formal, if that's okay. I have to say how honored I am and how surprised, actually, I was that the family asked me to speak here today. I'd only practiced law with Mr. Bunn during his final years, and I thought long and hard about what I wanted to say. And at first I thought that since this was a Bar Association event, I should focus on his legal career. But then I thought, since the family asked me to speak, that I was going to talk to you about my Mr. Bunn, the Mr. Bunn that I knew, the Mr. Bunn that was much less interested in teaching me about law and much more interested in teaching me about life. My first case, though, in Superior Court was with Mr. Bunn. It was one of these church cases that Hatch Little Bunn used to specialize in at the time. In this particular case, the pastor had been fired and had literally chained himself to the pulpit. And Mr. Bunn and I were in Superior Court on an injunction to keep him out of the church. I was mainly assisting, so I was watching Mr. Bunn. The courtroom was full of little old ladies in their Sunday finest. I believe Judge Stevens was sitting on the bench. And I sat there and watched Mr. Bunn, and he was fantastic. I mean, he was so handsome and so distinguished. He was old Raleigh. He was Southern lawyer, Southern gentleman. The cadence of his voice was so calming and soothing. He was part Southern lawyer, part Southern preacher, and he just had the audience, the courtroom, just eating out of the palm of his hand. I remember thinking at the time that I was watching the end of an era, the end of a time when the practice of law was more of an art, when lawyers talked more about common law and common sense and less about the latest Westlaw case site. I can still see Mr. Bunn's legal pad with his handwriting on it, just covering the whole pad. He wrote everything out. And he was fabulous. We won that day, and I remember thinking how privileged I was to have been there. As far as I know, I think that's the last time Mr. Bunn appeared in Superior Court. So I was very blessed to have been in court with him and to have experienced that. Now, Mr. Bunn and I didn't talk about law a whole lot. What we talked about was our hobbies. Mr. Bunn and I both enjoyed farming. I lived out in the country. I had a much bigger plot than he did, but both of us talked about our gardens a great deal. I used to grow tomato plants in my greenhouse, and I particularly remembered one summer that I had a bunch left over and brought them to Mr. Bunn. I had unfortunately forgotten to label them, so I didn't know what they were. And Mr. Bunn was so distraught they were all yellow tomatoes. But he must have enjoyed them, because I remember at the end of the year he took one of the tomatoes and pressed it and saved the seeds. And I told him it wouldn't work. It was a hybrid tomato, not an heirloom. But what did I know? The next year he had the biggest crop of yellow tomatoes you'd ever seen. So I think he would have made an excellent farmer. Mr. Bunn was very interested in woodworking. He had a wood shop there at his house, and he used to make furniture and repair furniture. And I was telling him about my experiences going to the Franklin County dump. Out in the country, you have to take your own trash, and a lot of times I would go to the dump and come back with more than I took. I'd come back with furniture and was telling Mr. Bunn about it. Well, he had to have some. So I remember picking out a few pieces and bringing them to him. And he took them out to his wood shop and gave them new life. And I believe Patricia still has a couple of pieces in the house now. I have to say, out of all the things I ever did, you know, I attended Duke, I was a Duke cheerleader, I worked on the Hill in the Capitol, but Mr. Bunn was most impressed with my shopping. I'm a thrift store shopper, Goodwill, and I'd come in with a new outfit, and Mr. Bunn would say, "How much did you pay for that?" $3. And then Patricia would come into the office admonishing me for bragging. Mr. Bunn could not understand why it cost her $200 for an outfit when Tina would dress for $3. I highly doubt that angels pay attention to what we're doing down here, but if Mr. Bunn was paying attention, I would want him to know that the outfit today was $9.50. I think Mr. Bunn would be proud. Mr. Bunn had a lot to be proud of. For those of you who didn't know him, he was an exceptional man. They always say that the generation from World War II that lived through the Depression and the World War was our greatest generation, and I can certainly believe that after having known Mr. Bunn. Mr. Bunn grew up here in Raleigh. He enlisted in the Air Force as soon as he turned 18, much to his father's dismay, because his father promptly unenlisted him. Mr. Bunn, not to be outdone, went to another county and enlisted again, and then it was too late for his father to undo it. But he served in the Air Force during World War II. He flew B-29 bombers, and we're all very lucky that he survived it and that we all had a chance to know him. Mr. Bunn came back and he graduated from Wake Forest School of Law. He came here to Raleigh and practiced in Wake County. He was a solicitor for Wake County, which is what our DA is now. And he did that for a few years before joining the practice of law with his father. They practiced over here in the Lawyers Building and formed Bunn, Hatchman, and Bunn. They did that until 1964 when Judge Hatch and Jimmy Little and Mr. Bunn bought our current location over on Hillsborough Street and moved. The elder Mr. Bunn informed them that they had no business moving out to the country like that. And that he wasn't going. They ignored him. Mr. Bunn moved his office over the weekend and set up the elder Mr. Bunn at our location on Hillsborough Street. They opened the doors that Monday morning, and the elder Mr. Bunn didn't show up. Mr. Bunn got worried, went to check on his father. He was sitting at home in his three-piece suit, reading the paper, drinking coffee, saying, "I told you I wasn't coming." And he did it. To my knowledge, the elder Mr. Bunn never practiced over on our Hillsborough Street location. But we are all lucky that our Mr. Bunn practiced law with us for over 50 years. And he built a practice that still exists today. It's been there for almost 60 years. When I think of the lawyers that have come through and have worked with him and that he has mentored, it's a lot to be proud of. Mr. Bunn had a practice of corporate law. He did some criminal law in his younger days, and he practiced a lot of real estate law. Mr. Bunn had a real knack for real estate, whether it was in his personal life or whether it was even at the firm. He even excelled in it in mistakes. I've always heard about a particular piece of property out on Highway 64, when Highway 64 was nothing but a way to the beach, that Mr. Bunn did a closing on. Back in those days, he did what any good title attorney would do. He asked Jimmy Little, "Is the title okay?" Jimmy Little replied that it was, and Mr. Bunn proceeded to close the property. There was a title problem, and Hatchell and Bunn had to purchase it. It was the best mistake he ever made. I always heard Hatchell and Bunn sold that piece of property for 7 times what they paid for it. So even in his mistakes, Mr. Bunn was golden. I also always heard that Mr. Bunn had a promising career in politics. He served in the North Carolina legislature during the 60s and had a chance to run for U.S. Congress, but turned it down because his family was more important to him. And that's the kind of man that Mr. Bunn was. Faith and family were the 2 most important things to him. I remember coming back from a firm retreat in Southern Pines, and I rode with Mr. Bunn, and the whole way back, we talked about his life. He didn't tell me about his cases or his clients. What he talked about was his faith and his family. That's who he was. Mr. Bunn was a true Christian. And I don't mean the kind that goes to church on Sunday and that's it. I'm talking about the kind that talked about it. And it wasn't in a pushy way or in a way that made you feel uncomfortable. It was in a way that let you know that Jesus was beside him. And with Mr. Bunn, he was. Mr. Bunn lived it. He talked about it and he lived it. I remember Mr. Bunn on numerous occasions helping the homeless that at the time were on Hillsborough Street quite often. He would give them money if they needed money. If he thought that they were going to use the money for drugs or alcohol, he would literally go down to the char grill and get them something to eat and bring it back. That's the kind of man he was. He would also sometimes give them a ride, which made me really nervous. but Mr. Bunn was that good and that golden and that exceptional. I think all of us, when we look back on our life, we want to think that we cared for and that we provided for our family, that we made our community a better place, and that we served our Lord. And I think Mr. Bunn excelled in all three, and that all of us are better off for having known him. And I want to thank you for this opportunity to talk to you about my Mr. Bunn and our Mr. Bunn. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Senator Josh Stein. Senator Stein went to Dartmouth undergrad and Harvard Law School, and he is here to honor Gary Govert.
Yes.
Your Honor, distinguished guests, and dear friends, this is my distinct honor to be here with you all this afternoon to remember my good friend, Gary Govert. When Gary and I first met about 15 years ago, I was the director of the Consumer Protection Division, relatively new to my position, and Gary was working in private practice with the law firm Smith, Helms, Mullis & Moore, as he had for the prior 14 years. I was relatively new. I was looking for a special deputy attorney general who could help me supervise the extensive and diverse litigation in the Consumer Protection Division. Gary had only recently let it be known to our mutual friend, Eddie Spees, that he was interested in making a change because he again wanted to serve the public as he had in the U.S. Navy in the Vietnam War. Eddie made the introduction, and when Gary and I sat down to talk about our interests and needs, I ended up doing more of the selling than Gary because I instantly knew he was the guy I wanted in the position as special deputy. And I was thrilled when he accepted the position. I'll always be grateful to Eddie for introducing me to Gary, who became as close a friend as he was a valued colleague. As we were remembering Gary in this courtroom, it's appropriate that I begin my remarks by noting what an excellent lawyer Gary was. He was a skeptical reader, a nuanced thinker, and a precise writer. In my view, the quality of the division's legal work was already outstanding, and Gary came in and immediately enhanced that. It may surprise all of you here, but supervising lawyers is not always easy. Yet Gary made it look so. He respected the autonomy of the assistant attorneys general as litigators and saw it as his job to help them create the best product that they possibly could. He was excellent at asking probing questions about the strength of the Attorney General's potential claim, about the most compelling way to present the evidence, and possible resolutions that were fair to all the parties. In particular, Gary was an excellent editor, regularly improving the potency and clarity of our division's work product. I sincerely wish Gary were here to have helped edit my remarks. they certainly would have had more wit and more self-deprecation. Gary substantially improved the work of the Consumer Protection Division in the 8 years that we worked together there. And as a result, tens of thousands of North Carolinians achieved relief from some unfair or deceptive trade practice. In a very real way, he helped people, which is what I think he really wanted to do. Gary was also an amusing colleague, not always intentionally so. It was entertaining to watch Gary try, when he first joined the division, to adapt to the life as a public lawyer, having come from private practice. He would regularly ask who would help him with his copying and faxing. It took him a little while to appreciate how overstretched our support staff was, and then even once he did have that appreciation, he remained an accomplished grumbler about it. After I left the Attorney General's office, Gary later moved within the department to become Assistant Solicitor General, work that he enjoyed immensely. He was a long-serving member of the Appellate's Rule Commission, including a stint as chair, work that he truly cherished. I believe that in another life, Gary would have been happiest as a judge. He cherished his work as law clerk for Chief Justice Jim Exum. He loved reading, thinking, and writing. With his tall stature, distinguished bearing, gray hair, round glasses, and deep voice, not to mention his remarkable legal ability, Gary would have been a hell of a judge. Your Honor, excuse my language. Gary was also a great friend. He was curious about the world and enjoyed pontificating about it, whether it was walking to lunch or sermonizing at Cary Presbyterian Church. He really enjoyed the time when he upset a number of his fellow congregates, whom he loved, by demonizing the SUV. Were any of y'all on Gary's email distribution list? It was my honor to be an involuntary member of that email distribution list. It's not one which you sought, nor was it one that you could leave. I miss his regular forwarding of the latest David Brooks column, accompanied by Gary's own editorial commentary. He embraced Brooks' combination of erudition, moralism, and political moderation. Gary was a wonderful lunch companion because he could not only talk politics, political theory, ethics, religion, but he was a huge Carolina basketball fan. Summertime, however, he could prove a little insufferable if it was a good year for his St. Louis Cardinals. Of course, as a Red Sox fan, our lunches in late October 2013 and 2004 were particularly enjoyable for me. Gary's favorite role, however, was as husband to Ellen and father to Jeff, Ian, and Sarah. He loved Ellen. He thought he was the luckiest person in the world because Ellen agreed to marry him, and I think he's probably right. Ellen's positive and engaging personality was a perfect complement to Gary's occasional grumpiness. More than one person likened Gary to Eeyore, but when he talked about his kids, he was Tigger personified. Whenever he talked about the different things that interested them, and they were all very different from each other, Gary would sparkle. It was lovely to observe and a wonderful way to remember him in my mind. When Gary Govert died on January 19th, the Wake County Bar Association and the Department of Justice lost a remarkable lawyer. The many people fortunate to him lost a great and caring friend. Most poignantly, Ellen and the kids lost the man who deeply loved and was proud of them. I thank this memorial service of the Wake County Bar Association for providing us all an opportunity to reflect together on Gary Govert, our friend and colleague who died decades too soon and whom we remember with affection and respect. Thank you all.
Our next speaker is the Honorable Robert Rader. For 21 years, he's been a district court judge here in Wake County, and for the last 8 years, he's been our Chief District Court Judge. He's a graduate of Campbell Law School and NC State undergrad, and he's here to honor Thomas Dimmock.
As I think all of you in this room know and can clearly see, Wake County Bar has been blessed over the years with some truly incredible individuals who've made significant contributions to their community and to the world, and few more so than Tom Dimmock. I'm deeply honored today by the family to be asked to share a few thoughts about the life of this amazing human being. Tom Dimmock was unlike any person that I have ever known. He was extremely intelligent, quick-witted, caring, compassionate, eternally optimistic, always smiling, just like in that photo, and always happy. Tom believed in getting things done, and he felt there was too much good to be done in the world to waste time talking or contemplating how to do it. He loved a challenge. He absolutely loved it. All you had to do was tell Tom Dimmock that there was a problem that you didn't think could be solved. It was if you triggered a switch, the gears would start turning, his eyes would light up, and he would begin gladly accepting the challenge, trying to figure out a way to solve the problem. You never had to tell Tom Dimmock to think outside the box. He always did. Tom was born in Elkins, West Virginia in 1949 into a family of pastors and caregivers and international missionaries. Knowing Tom's family, you could easily understand why he had such a strong faith and a passion for helping other people from an early age. Tom's father, Albert Dimmock, was a Presbyterian minister, which some of you may know, and served as pastor at West Raleigh Presbyterian Church for some time when he was active in the community, and was actually, because of his help with juvenile court, was instrumental in founding Haven House, which has served at-risk children and runaway children in our community for over 42 years. Tom, subsequently, as an adult, served on the board of Haven House to continue that great tradition. And just a few weeks before he passed away, led a group of about 40 teenagers to do volunteer work over at Haven House. Tom graduated from NC State University in 1971 with a degree in economics. It would probably come to no surprise to those of you who knew him that while attending NC State, Tom was on the cheerleading squad and was the mic man, the microphone man at all the sporting events. Interestingly, Tom recruited his lifelong friend Mike Dodd, who was also at State, to be actively involved in the same thing. Tom and Mike would later go on to be partners in the practice of law, as many of you know. There are quite a few stories from Tom's days at NC State University, but I think one stands out among all of them. As a cheerleader, Tom was constantly in search of ways to get the fans excited and fired up, particularly in Reynolds Coliseum. So Tom and a friend of his hatched this idea to build a sound meter that would light up with sound light up as the sound reached certain decibel levels. The concept behind the meter is the higher the sound level, the more lights would light up. So the box with 15 lights was constructed in Tom's basement and hung in Reynolds Coliseum, where it's been a fixture for years for Wolfpack basketball fans. On countless occasions, and I went to State subsequent to Tom, so I saw that light meter for years. On countless occasions, we witnessed diehard Wolfpackers screaming to the top of their lungs, trying to get that sound meter lit up to the top. Everybody just assumed NC State, being a world-class engineering school, some distinguished professor or graduate students came up with this concept, figured out how to make it work, and build it. But the truth is, the lights had actually nothing to do with the sound. Tom had a friend who sat in the rafters with switches, and he would light the lights up as the crowd got louder. That was classic Tom Dimmock. You got a big problem, you figure out a simple solution, and he did. It was also during his years at NC State that Tom met the love of his wife, his lovely wife, Boyd. By the way, Boyd spent about 40 years with IBM, so she's the one we should have had up here working on this IT problem. As the story goes, Boyd was placed a visitor's card in the offering plate one Sunday at West Raleigh Presbyterian Church while attending a service with a roommate. The industrious young Tom, being the son of the pastor, went through the visitor's cards to learn more about this young lady. The two subsequently went out for ice cream, began to see each other, and the relationship was sealed several months later when Boyd needed 500 chicken feathers for a Meredith class competition. Never to be deterred, Tom managed to come up to the rescue by locating and acquiring feathers at a local chicken farm. Just last year, Tom and Boyd celebrated their 41st wedding anniversary. Tom received his law degree from the University of North Carolina in 1975. But make no doubt about it, he was a loyal Wolfpacker to day's end. Although law was a departure from the family tradition of the ministry, Tom saw the practice of law as a way to help people, and particularly those who could not help themselves. Tom opened his own law office in 1975 in downtown Raleigh, adjacent to Sam Johnson and Dick Gamble. Both Sam and Dick took him under his wing, served as his mentor for those first few years as Tom started to get established in practice. 3 years later, Tom relocated to the BB&T building downtown and was ready to hire his first associate. Tom hired Walker Reagan, who was fresh out of law school, and they shared office space with Lenny Jernigan and Ruth Edmondson. So you can imagine what that was like. That had to be a lot of fun. Tom used to, for years throughout the practice of law, delight in telling the others in the firm that Walker went to Duke, but he had to whistle the state fight song before he could get his paycheck. While Tom and Walker were establishing themselves about that time in the legal community and building the practice of law, and soon became Dimmock and Reagan, Tom's old college buddy, Mike Dodd, was in Germany with the Army, having joined the JAG Corps after graduation from Wake Forest Law School. Mike returned about 1980, joined Tom and Walker in what became the firm Dimmock, Reagan, and Dodd. The firm relocated to the Cameron Brown building out in North Hills, and ultimately to the park on Millbrook out at the corner of Six Forks and Millbrook. With Walker Reagan living in Cary and the real estate practice booming about that period of time, it was decided to open an office in Cary because there's so much real estate work in Cary and Raleigh that they hardly do it all. At about that time, Fred Toms, who lived and practiced in Cary, who's also here today, who had practiced for many years, joined the firm, and it became Dimmock, Reagan, Dodd, and Toms. I first came to know Tom in the summer of '84 when I was a summer clerk with the firm. Tom was handling the real estate closings in the Raleigh office as well as a substantial amount of civil, domestic, and estate planning matters. I was hired by the firm to when I got out of law school a year later in '85, fresh out of law school, to come to the Raleigh office and take over the real estate work so Tom could concentrate more on the domestic law practice. Tom devoted a significant amount of his time to the practice of domestic law, and while viewed by many as one of the most stressful and emotionally draining areas of the practice, Tom was able to keep a positive attitude and always worked hard to encourage his clients to do the same even when faced with challenging situations. Tom had an incredible ability to balance the stress and demands of the law practice with a desire to maintain a positive quality of life. Throughout his career, Tom strongly adhered to the principle that the practice of law was a profession and not a business. And Walker Reagan and I were laughing about this the other day. Not that Tom wasn't an astute businessman. He was very astute. In fact, one of the last cases I worked on with Tom was a fairly large wrongful death case before I left to go on the bench. And we were preparing for mediation one night, and I said, Tom, how did we get this case? Where did this case come from? He said, well, a friend of mine who sings in the choir at church. And he said, you know, it pays to go to church, Rader. I said, I understand that, Tom. Well, I understand that. I go to church. I said, oh, okay. So this friend of yours, he's a good friend of the family. And he kind of looked down. He said, well, sort of. Not exactly. He works at the funeral home. I said, Tom, the case came from the funeral home? And he said, hey, everybody needs a lawyer. Classic Tom. But Tom found absolute joy in being able to help clients solve problems or find resolutions without creating a financial hardship on them or their families. Few things offended Tom more than an attorney who prioritized the fee over the service to the client. You know, in all the years I knew Tom, I don't think I ever saw him get angry or upset or use profanity, except for one time, and I'll never forget it. He received a proposed consent, custody, and visitation order from another attorney. It was 10 pages and in great detail, and the attorney wanted lawyer's fees for preparing it of a significant amount, and the custody and visitation order was for a dog. Tom was incensed. He did not like that one bit. But Tom's desire to solve problems in the least adversarial manner possible ultimately led him to the concept of collaborative law. And in the later years of practice, Tom became a strong advocate of alternative dispute resolution, particularly the idea of collaborative law as a means to resolve issues, particularly in domestic cases. And in fact, in 2003, Tom appeared at the General Assembly to speak in support of legislation which codified the collaborative law process in North Carolina. Tom was a skilled litigator, extremely bright, knowledgeable in the law, and a fierce adversary. He was highly respected by his fellow members of the bar, especially in the area of domestic relations. Tom had high ethical standards, and he always treated the court, opposing parties, witnesses, and court personnel with the utmost courtesy and respect. He had a strong command of legal concepts. He was quick, he was smart, he had an amazingly strong work ethic. Tom was like the Energizer Bunny. He kept going and going and going, and almost always had more energy than anybody else in the room. He knew how to relate to people in and out of the courtroom, regardless of their position in life. He held himself to high standards and expected the same from those who worked with him. There was no cutting corners or taking the easy way out for client matters in Tom's book. Tom believed in doing it right. There was nothing less than a 60-year title search for Tom. No tacking on. I've always been grateful to Tom for instilling in me as a young lawyer the importance of adhering to the highest ethical standards in the practice of law. And I think Mike and Walker would agree with the same thing. Although Tom Dimmock enjoyed the practice of law, his true passion was his family and his church. His daughters, Juliana and Laurie, who are here today, were the absolute apples of his eye. He loved them dearly and instilled in them his values for family, faith, and community. Not long after Tom and Boyd were married in 1973, they joined Trinity Baptist Church on Six Forks Road. Tom proved to be a pillar of the church, teaching Sunday school, singing in the choir, serving as a deacon, serving as a trustee, numerous committees, serving as Habitat for Humanity leader, and leading Bible studies, with the exception of the role of pastor and minister of music, and he might question that one. He held about every role you could hold in that church. His Sunday school class was known simply as the Tom Dimmock class, and he had some members dating back 40 years. Over the years, there was no doubt Trinity Baptist Church became a stronger and more vibrant church because of the contributions of Tom Dimmock. Tom's work in the faith community extended far beyond his own church. He served as legal counsel for the North Carolina Baptist Foundation for many years. He also served on the Board of Trustees and as parliamentarian of the Raleigh Baptist Association and the North Carolina Baptist State Convention. Tom's knowledge and grasp of parliamentary procedure led to a reputation as an expert in the application of Robert's Rules of Order. And as one friend observed, Tom was a model of how law and grace can be virtues that coexist in one person without tipping the scales of justice and fairness in one direction or the other. Tom had an unyielding passion to help others, and that passion later led him to Kiwanis and the Kiwanis mission of improving the world one child and one community at a time. Tom's journey in Kiwanis began some 30 years ago when he first helped found the Wake Forest Kiwanis Club. Tom served as president and led numerous club projects. We all know, time after time, Tom would say, Rader, there's a pancake breakfast at the Wake Forest Kiwanis Club. I know you're coming. I said, Tom, I live a long way from the Wake Forest Kiwanis Club. Well, you got to eat breakfast. I mean, come on. So Tom served as president of that club. He eventually expanded his efforts to help found other clubs throughout North Carolina. I recall that when you help, if you're in Kiwanis, you probably know this, but if you help found a Kiwanis club, you're presented with a little acrylic building block, and it has the Kiwanis emblem, and it's a symbol for your contributions and the significance of your contributions in building a Kiwanis club. Tom had one of those blocks that sat on his credenza behind his desk in the law office, and I saw it almost every day when I went in there. Over a few years after Tom got involved in Kiwanis, I noticed more blocks and more blocks, till pretty soon there were, I think my last count was 16 or 18 blocks he had in there. It was a virtual wall. Tom's leadership qualities quickly became widely known throughout the Kiwanis community, and he began progressing up the ranks, eventually being elected to lieutenant governor and governor of the Carolinas District. And the Carolinas District covers both North and South Carolina, which includes more than 180 Kiwanis clubs, many of which Tom helped build, and more than 6,000 members. He was ultimately elected a trustee of Kiwanis International, which is no small feat, where he served for 3 years. And in 2012, he received the Carolinas District's first ever Lifetime Achievement Award. During his tenure with Kiwanis, Tom worked on numerous worthwhile campaigns to eliminate tetanus, spina bifida, and iodine deficiency. At the time of his death in January, he was just finishing a project as co-chair that was highly successful, known as Project Eliminate campaign, that had raised $3 million to eradicate maternal and child tetanus in third world countries. When Tom, a few years ago, I saw him across the street in the courthouse, and he approached me. He said, "I'm going to retire." And I looked at him, and he said, "Sorta." And I knew that his idea of retirement was probably different from most people's. There'd be no rocking chairs in the picture for Tom Dimmock, because the Tom I knew only had 2 speeds, and that was on and off, and he was rarely off. His first step after retirement was to buy a boat and venture out with Boyd on a 7,500-mile journey on what is commonly known as the Great Loop, which began on the coast of North Carolina, sailed up the east coast of New York, through the St. Lawrence Seaway, across Canada, down the Mississippi River, back to the Gulf of Mexico. After finishing this once-in-a-lifetime voyage, Tom returned home to a slower pace, which involved mission trips in recent years to New Orleans, New Jersey, Honduras, Cuba, Belize, and Peru, to name a few, to help with hurricane recovery and building projects. In his spare time, Tom could also be found riding with the Cycle Pass, which many of the attorneys here are familiar with. It's a cycling team out of Selma comprised primarily of attorneys who ride to raise money to fight multiple sclerosis. Tom left this earth unexpectedly on the morning of January 21st of this year at age 65, way too young. But even that morning, before he left, he had just finished speaking to a group of Key Club students at Rollsville High School. Yet one more chance to make an impact in the community. Tom Dimmock truly loved life as much as anyone that I think I have ever known. He lived life to the fullest, and he wanted everyone around him to do the same. He was an extraordinary example for all of us to follow. He always set his goals high, and he strived to achieve them. He was a devoted husband and family man, a committed pillar of the church, a tireless community advocate, a respected lawyer, a loyal friend, and a wonderful colleague. Tom's commitment to improve the lives of all that he encountered was an inspiration to all that knew him. Knowing Tom quite simply made you want to be a better person. And there's no doubt in my mind that the world is a better place for the life of Tom Dimmock. Thank you.
Thank you to all the speakers. It is hearing about lawyers like these, from lawyers like these, that makes working on this committee among the most fulfilling things I do as a lawyer. I'd like to thank the members of the committee who helped put this together, and the Vice Chair, Brian Oden, Shawla, and Whitney. I'd like to thank Your Honor for again helping us with this, and Your Honor for helping us with that, and the bailiff and clerk. Most of all, I'd like to thank all of you for coming and for allowing us to honor your loved ones and for sharing so much with us. Thank you.
Mr. Chiaffi, thank you for your kind words, and thank you as well for your fine work and that of your committee. I was so rattled by the technical difficulties that delayed our program unexpectedly that as I quickly surveyed the crowd for elected officials and public officials, I didn't look right in front of me and fully inspect the front row. And therefore I failed to recognize Senator Josh Stein of our General Assembly of North Carolina. My deepest apologies, and of course you've been amply presented now. And also in her modesty, blending in too well with the crowd, I failed also to recognize our elected district attorney of Wake County, Lauren Freeman. Thanks to them, thanks to all of you for being here for this momentous occasion. Our heartfelt thanks is extended to all of the presenters, the organizers, and the facilitators for such a beautiful and meaningful program. At this special time of year, marked by exhibitions of joy, peace, thankfulness, reflection, and love, may we all include in such manifestations an examination of our own roles that we fulfill in positively contributing to these lofty ideals, challenged and motivated by the stellar examples that are shown in the lives of those whom we have honored and still cherish today. Mr. Bailiff, at this time, we're going to be adjourned, sine die.
A special memorial session, Wake County Superior Court, now stands adjourned, sine die. Safe travels home.
Thank you, Mr. Bailiff. Thank you all.